I'm now reading Thai capital under emergency as pro, pro, pro government leader shot and wounded in Northeast. A leading pro-government activist was shot and wounded on Wednesday in Thailand's northeast, a stronghold of Prime Minister as a state of emergency began in the capital, where protesters are trying to force her from power. The government issued the 60-day emergency decree late on Tuesday, handing security agencies wide powers to detain suspects, impose a curfew, and limit gatherings in and around Bangkok. Officials said it was aimed at preventing an escalation of the protests that have gripped the capital for more than 2 months and brought parts of the center to a halt. Bangkok appeared normal, and people went about their business as usual. Police did not try to break up the protests, including one outside a complex where was working. The highlighting the risk of the political deadlock turning violent. Richard leader who had warned of a nationwide fight in the military launched a coup, was wounded in the arm and leg in a drive-by shooting at his home in the northeastern town of Aden. Police said they believed it was politically motivated. From the way the assailants fired, they obviously didn't want him to leave. His wife told Reuters. Police said they had found 39 bullet cases at the house. He leads thousands of pro-government supporters in Aden province. On Tuesday, he told Reuters that if the military attempt a coup, I can assure you, on behalf of the 20 provinces in the northeast, that we will fight. The country will be set alight if the soldiers come out. So far, the military, which has been involved in 18 actual or attempt coups in the past 81 years, has kept out of the fray. The police are charged with imposing the state of emergency under orders from to treat protesters against her government with patience. Paul Chambers, director of research at the Institute of Southeast Asia Affairs in Mai, said the emergency decree was designed largely to give legal protection if there is violence and the police step in. 9 people have died and dozens have been wounded in violence, including 2 grenade attacks in the capital over the weekend, since protesters took to the streets in November to demand step down and the People's Council be set up to bring sweeping reforms to Southeast Asia's second biggest economy. Fears of election day violence. The protests are the latest eruption in a political conflict that has gripped the country for 8 years. It pits the middle class of Bangkok and royalist establishment against the mainly poorer supporters of and her brother, ex-premier, toppled by the military in 2006. Called a snap election for February 2nd in the hope of diffusing the protests. The election commission is worried it will fan the violence and says the protests have prevented some candidates from registering, meaning there will not be a quorum to open parliament. It is asking the constitutional court to rule on whether it can delay the vote. If it happens on February 2nd, there will not be enough new MPs for a new government to be formed. Anyway, then Thailand would move to a period of growing limbo where the judiciary would decide on whether to void the election or not. Chambers said. Protest leader has rejected the election outright. It accuses of corruption and nepotism and wants to change the electoral system to eradicate the influence of who lives in exile in Dubai to avoid a jail term handed down in 2008 for abuse of power. Southop, when he was a deputy prime minister, sending troops to end mass protests by supporters in 2010. More than 20 people died in that unrest. The crisis has hurt tourism and business confidence, but the central bank, in unexpectedly positive comments said it thought the impact of the crisis would only be short-term. Adding to his problems, farmers who are part of her core constituency have threatened to join the protest if they do not get paid for the rice they have sold to the government under controversial intervention scheme. Her government guaranteed them an above market price for their rice, but the scheme has run into funding difficulties. The government has sold the bonds and is seeking loans to tide it over, but the election commission, which has to approve such action by the caretaker government, has declined to give its support. I'm now reading Thai government declares state of emergency as protests drag on. The Thai government declared a 60-day state of emergency to start on Wednesday, saying it wanted to prevent any escalation of more than 2 months of protests, aimed at forcing Prime Minister Yingluck Shinawatra from power. The decree, which covers Bangkok and surrounding provinces, allows security agencies to impose curfews, detain suspects without charge, censor media, ban political gatherings of more than 5 people, and declare areas of off-limits. Yingluck said her government has no intention of confronting the protesters, who have been allowed to close off several government buildings, including her own. The military, involved in several previous coups, has so far stayed neutral. We will use peaceful negotiations with the protesters in line with international standards. We have told the police to stick with the international standards, to be patient with the protesters, she told reporters on Tuesday. She said police, not the military, will mainly be used to maintain control. We need it because the protesters have closed government buildings, banks, and escalated the situation, which has caused injuries and deaths. The government sees the need to announce the emergency decree to keep the situation under control. Labor Minister Challam told a news conference following a cabinet meeting. Has called on election for February 2nd. For election for February 2nd, which she will almost certainly win, and which the opposition plans to boycott. However, the election commission said it would seek a constitutional court ruling on Wednesday on whether it can delay the vote. It says that the protests have prevented some candidates from registering, which means that there would not be a quorum to open parliament after the election. The protests, now in their third month, have closed off parts of the capital in the latest installment of an 8-year political conflict that has seen sporadic outbreaks of violence that pit the middle class and royalist establishment against the mainly poorer supporters of and her brother, ex-premier who was toppled by the military in 2006. Farmers threatened to join protests led by 64-year-old anti-government firebrand. The protests were triggered by moves last year to grant amnesty to her brother, the self-exiled former premier, whom accuses of nepotism and corruption. 9 people have died since they began in November, the worst violence since 2010. It was substitute at the time a deputy prime minister who sent in troops to end mass protests by pro-Thanking supporters. More than 90 people died in that unrest. Protesters want to suspend what they say is a democracy steered by the self-exiled billionaire Saksin, and alter electoral elector, elector, electoral arrangements so that his allies are unable to return to power. In a potentially warning development of whose power base depends heavily on rural support. Some farmers have threatened to join the protesters if they do not get paid for the rice they have sold to the state. A scheme under which farmers are guaranteed an above market price for their rice has been a centerpiece of the government's program, but as financing strength mounts, some complain they have been waiting 3 or 4 months to be paid. The protests are also being to undermine Celsius, Asia's second biggest economy. On Monday, the Thai subsidiary of auto giant Toyota Motor Corporation, one of Thailand's biggest foreign investors, said it might reconsider a $600 million spending plan and even cut production if the unrest drags on. And some economists expect the central bank will be forced to further cut interest rates when it meets on Wednesday to give a lift to the economy. Now reading Human Rights Watch chides China for failing to push reform. New York-based Human Rights Watch accused China on Tuesday of failing to embark upon political reforms which meet the people's demands for real change and of pursuing anti-corruption activists despite its declared crackdown on graft. The Chinese government has responded to domestic and international pressure by announcing partial reforms on issues such as re-education through labor and one-child policy. Brad Adams, Asia director at Human Rights Watch, said in a statement. But the leadership has also embarked on a harsh crackdown on critics, while using hotline rhetoric to make clear they have no intention of liberalizing the political system. China has consistently defended its human rights record and lambasted foreign groups and governments which criticize it. Beijing says lifting millions out of poverty, as it has done, is an important achievement in its rights record, and that it guarantees its people wide-ranging freedoms. When Xi Jinping became president last year, there have been hopes that he would take a softer line of government critics and embark upon political reform. But since taking office, the ruling Communist Party has gone after critics with renewed vigor. In its annual World Report, Human Rights Watch said that China had yet to embark on fundamental reforms that adequately respond to the public's increased demands for justice, and accountability. The group said it was particular, particular, particularly, particularly, particular, particularly, particularly concerned about the arrest of activists who have campaigned for officials to publicly disclose their assets. One of the most prominent of those, Xu Zheyang, goes on trial in Beijing on Wednesday. While Xi Jinping has spoken a lot about tackling corruption, and there have been some high-profile arrests, the government has harshly retaliated against those who exposed high-level corruption in the government and party. Adams said, other areas of concern include other areas of concern include a government campaign to stifle online rumors and continued repression in the restive ethnic minority regions of Tibet and Xinjiang, Human Rights Watch said. It added that international pressure on China over its human rights situation was inconsistent last year, saying that some countries like France and Britain had toned down criticism in summits with China. China is home to more than 1 billion people and is a major global power. So how the rest of the world addresses its human rights situation is more vital than ever, Adams said. British drinks firm SAB Miller reported rising sales in the third quarter of its financial year as business in emerging markets offset a poor performance in Europe. In a statement released Tuesday, sales grew by 4% in the 3 months to the end of December, compared with the outcome in the same period of the previous fiscal year, said the trading update from the maker of growth and beers. In Latin America and Africa, sales rose by 5% and 8% respectively. Revenues grew 6% in Asia Pacific and by 7% in South Africa. However, North American revenues added just 1%, while Europe posted a 6% decline on the back of challenging market conditions. Growth in the third quarter was driven by our emerging market businesses, where we are successfully targeting new consumers across our brand portfolios, said Chief Executive Alan Clark in a statement. The combination of pricing and volume growth, particularly in Africa, Latin America, and China, supported net producer revenue growth of 4%. This was in spite of continued weakness in consumer sentiment which particularly impacted our European and North America businesses. Total beverage volumes, meanwhile, grew 2% in the reporting period, with larger volumes rising 1% and soft drinks volumes gaining 7%. SAB Miller, which is listed on London and produces well-known beer brands including Foster's, Miller Lite. The group had announced in December that its chairman and former chief executive has died following an illness. South African National Market 64 has stepped down as chief executive last April after undergoing surgery for brain tumor. View comments. Hypocritical. Now reading hypocritical crackdown on China corruption activists. Amnesty International condemned Tuesday the forthcoming trials of 8 anti-corruption activists in China, calling them hypocritical and saying they highlight flaws in the ruling communist parties. Communist parties much publicized anti-graft campaign starting Wednesday with the case of Xi, one of China's most prominent current dissidents. The 8 activists face possible 5-year prison sentences. 5-year prison sentences in separate trials this week. The activists are part of the loose-knit group referred to as the New Citizens Movement, founded by Xi, a well-known lawyer and human rights campaigner. They're being prosecuted over peaceful protests in which they held up banners calling for government officials in China to disclose their financial assets, seen by some as a reform which would combat corruption. Since taking over as head of the Communist Party in November 2012, Xi Jinping has rapidly vowed to combat endemic graft in the country's political system, with state-run media covering the campaign extensively. But Chinese authorities do not tolerate any organized activity that might develop into challenge to their rule. Instead of President Xi Jinping's promised clamp down on corruption, We are seeing a crackdown against those that want to expose it. Rosanna Rife is Asia Research Director for London-based Amnesty International, said Tuesday in a statement headed China Hypocritical Crackdown on Anti-Corruption Campaigners. She and the other activists are accused of assembling a crowd to disrupt order in a public place. For their role in the street protests, consider Xi Jinping to be prisoner of conscience, and he should be released immediately and unconditionally, Rife said.